Joining me now is Ben Burris of the Chabot Observatory. Tell me about this telescope.
Well, we have three big telescopes here at Chabot. Two historic telescopes, this 128-year-old 8-inch refractor, Leah is her name. And we have one larger but younger, 96-year-old refractor, which has a 20-inch lens, much larger. Plus a much younger, 8-year-old 36-inch telescope are all available for free public viewing every Friday and Saturday night.
Now that's sort of been the Chabot mission, isn't it? Anyone can look.
Well, the superintendent of Oakland schools back in 1883 had seen a public student observatory in Philadelphia. And so he said, Oakland has to have one. So he found Anthony Chabot, who footed the bill for this telescope and started the whole observatory. But it was part of Anthony Chabot's gift. He said, it shall forever and always be open free to the public. Right up here on the top of the Oakland Hills, best place in Oakland to have an observatory.
There's not a lot of light pollution here.
Well, there is a lot of light pollution here, but for being within Oakland, this is about the best place we can be. For a research observatory, we'd want to be much farther away from cities, out in the dark.
And that's one of the key things about this. It can still be a public observatory because people can actually get here in a pretty short span of time.
Yeah, and from the East Bay, it's anywhere from 20-minute drive to 5 minutes, depending on how far away you live.
Halley's Comet went by in 1910. Did they watch? Could they see Halley's from this?
I'm sure I wasn't around in 1910, but I'm sure they did.
But you had a Halley's experience also.
I did, yeah. I was still pretty young. And my grandfather, who had seen the 1910 appearance of Halley's Comet, got to see it again in 1986 because I had a small telescope and I was able to show him.
Oh.
So that was kind of special.
That is special.
In 1986, Halley's Comet wasn't nearly as visible as it was the previous time. So it took a telescope to actually see it. So I feel special that I was able to show my grandfather the comet twice in his lifetime.
That is kind of cool to see it twice. It sort of is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. We're in the Challenger Learning Center, and I'm here with flight instructor Susan Carroll. Susan, people come here for a special learning experience. What happens in this room?
When we have guests come into mission control, they're working with their teammates that are in the spacecraft and they're working towards mission objectives. They might want to land on Mars or land on the moon. They might want to intercept Comet Halley, and they have tasks that they're going through to accomplish those goals.
So in here, people are directing the work of people on the space station.
This is the brains of the mission right in here.
So people have each job is different?
Every job is different, and everybody has their goals that they're working towards and their tasks that they're following along.
So how many people sit in this room to do this?
We could have about 16 people in here.
Really?
So sometimes people double up on a station and they'll have a couple, more minds are better than one, right?
Yes, especially when things go wrong, and things do go wrong, don't they?
Occasionally they do. Sometimes we have a bumpy ride when we're out in space.
So what kinds of things can happen?
We might encounter a meteorite shower. There could be something going on our life support station. And of course, that's really important to keep everybody alive. We like to keep those systems up and running.
So when people get themselves through one of those events, what's it like? How do they feel?
Well, they're usually really worked up about it. They're very excited. A lot of times they really take on the role, and I've seen some students that'll start chewing on their collar or doing things that you can tell they're really nervous about it. And they follow their task cards and they come up with the solution, and then they save the day.
That must be great when they save the day.
Oh yes, it's great. So rewarding to see.
And now grown-ups can do this as well, right?
Absolutely. We have corporate missions that come in regularly, and they might be on both sides. So they have a long mission where they switch back and forth and they work as a team together. And they could also be just in the spacecraft and working on their tasks in there.
So you could either do the mission control part where you sit here and talk to them far away, or you can be in the Space Center and be doing the things that you need to do in space.
Exactly.
Well, now that you have done a few of these missions, are you going to spin off into space yourself?
Absolutely not. I like it here on Earth, and that's where I plan on staying.
We've moved from mission control to the spacecraft simulator, and I'm joined by Commander Henry Rosenthal. Henry, what goes on in this room? It looks very authentic.
It is authentic. This room is based on real NASA training simulators. This is meant to simulate a generic space station environment, or potentially the interior of an interplanetary spacecraft.
Okay, so the mission begins at Mission Control. They're flying to Mars, and they are speaking to the people then in this room.
Right, the mission begins on both sides. This spacecraft is en route to Mars at the beginning of the mission. Mars controllers are already on the surface of the planet in a permanently established base there. And they're bringing us in for a landing. On board the spacecraft here, we have real science going on. Astronauts are operating each of the stations here. They're taking readings and measurements, transmitting that information down to Mars base, where it's analyzed, and then we're apprised of any potential emergency situations on board the ship.
And then do you handle those emergencies?
Absolutely. We do it with the help of Mission Control. They're guiding us through the handling of high humidity, low humidity situations, potential meteoroid showers that we might be flying through. Almost anything could happen.
So as you're in this room and you're an astronaut and something goes wrong, what is the atmosphere like? How does it feel to the participants?
We try to convey a sense of urgency, but not a sense of panic. So we have lights that go off, we have alarms that sound, we get everybody's attention, we get everybody focused on the task at hand, and we get everybody putting their heads together to try to solve whatever the problem is. And when that problem is solved, the sense of relief and accomplishment is astounding.
Well, that's very interesting. So it sounds like it feels very real.
It does. If we're doing our job, it should feel absolutely real.
So what kind of experiments are the astronauts doing in here?
Well, we have the glove boxes. These contain soil and rock samples brought from Earth that are being compared with soil and rock samples collected on the surface of Mars that are at our Mars base in Mars Control. They're looking for matches of materials because, after all, where did all this come from? It came from materials that we dug out of the ground and fashioned, and we need to do the same thing on Mars. So we're looking for minerals that are useful for medicines, for construction, for all the things that we need.
What kind of skills it seems like this is a real learning experience where people come out different than they went in. What sort of skills do they learn while they're here?
Absolutely. The most gratifying stories I've heard are stories of people who came to a simulator with their classes as children and then, inspired by what happened in this environment, went on to work in the space industry, work for NASA, and there's quite a lot of those stories.
That's really something. Now, you've had some astronauts visit this room as well.
Quite a few.
And what is their impression?
Well, astronauts are always impressed by the Challenger Learning Centers. There are about 48 of these centers scattered across the country and a few dotted around the world. It's a program inspired by the Challenger disaster, created as a living memorial by the surviving spouses of the fallen astronauts to perpetuate the mission of that voyage, which was education.
Well, it sounds like it's doing its job. I have one more fun fact for you before we go. I'm standing on a pretty high platform next to a very large telescope named Rachel. Albert Einstein has also looked through this very telescope, and so can you. So be sure to come up and take a look at the night sky. From the Chabot Space and Science Center, for all of us at This Is Us, I'm Becca King-Reid saying so long.